Hi, welcome back to the channel. I My last video I talked about how my husband and I had gone through a bankruptcy back in 1999 and how I believe God restored everything and then some of what we had lost. But then over the years after that, um, I had lost my faith, and I have not been to church since about 2010. So it's been 15, 16 years. And I mean, I've been with friends and things, but I don't have a church home. I don't practice my faith, and I don't know why. And I want to dig into that a little bit for my own self. Whether anybody watches these videos or not, these next few videos are really going to be based on me asking questions and trying to find answers to maybe why I lost my faith and what I truly think about God. And I just want it to be honest. And I hope that my journey through this will maybe help some others as well. Now, I was raised in a church from birth to, my whole life, non denominational. It was a spirit filled church where we believed in miracles and speaking in tongues and things like that. And that was just normal for me. That's what church was. Our music was very, energetic and dynamic and emotional and, all the things. My dad was a deacon and an usher in the church. My mom sang in the choir. They both taught Sunday school. We were very involved. And I can't say when I remember back if I ever really took it all that seriously as a kid and as a teenager. I remember going to youth group and, going to Sunday school and things like that. But it was mostly just to hang out with my other friends there at the church. And I just don't remember us really taking any of it too seriously. We belonged to what would have been then considered a mega church, probably 3,500 people. Um, and we'd sit way up high in the back, and snicker and laugh and talk through the services. And in fact, I remember one time our pastor calling us out from the pulpit, like looking up and saying, "You kids up there, settle down." Oh my God, my parents had a fit. But yeah, I can't remember really taking it seriously. And through my teenage years, I drank, I smoked pot, I swore, I did all the things. And so I don't know how seriously I really took it. And then after I got married and had children, I did start to take it more seriously. I wanted my children raised in the faith. And at that point, we started going to smaller churches closer to home. We had moved out of, kind of away from there. My father had passed away, which had a huge played a huge thing in me wanting to rededicate my life to Christ because I wanted to see him again in heaven. And I believed I had to go to heaven to be able to see my father again. So I don't even know if that was a good reason, but I did rededicate my life. I started reading my Bible. I started going to church more regularly. And then eventually, as the years went on, we moved to Seattle. I got involved in another mega church. And the church I was involved in was supposedly, Holy Spirit filled, speaking in tongues, all the things, but it was also very, very strong on the prosperity gospel, which is what led me to believe that, our faith and prayer through the bankruptcy and tithing and being faithful gave us back everything we lost and then some. So there was a lot of belief in that. But my husband, although he was on and off with it, was never really super involved in the church or his faith. And that played a big role in difficulties in the marriage because my belief system didn't line up with his belief system. And so there were arguments and things about tithing and things like that. Although we got along for the most part, that was just kind of a place of contention. And my belief system was telling me that was Satan trying to get between us, trying to crush my faith, so it just made me dig in deeper. And honestly, our marriage probably wouldn't have lasted as long as it did had I not been involved in the church because I truly believed divorce was wrong. I needed to raise my children in a Christian home, all the things. Well, once the children were out of the house, my husband and I realized we really didn't have that much in common. We did divorce. And that's when my faith started to crumble. The church I was involved in was a mega church. I was not known personally by maybe just a handful of people. And going through the divorce, I didn't feel like I got the support from the church. I felt like I was looked down upon. And anyway, I turned my back on it and I started living for the world again. I was dating, I was drinking, I was going out, I was doing all the things that I had never done. When I was raising my kids, I didn't drink, not a sip. I didn't swear. I really wanted my kids raised in the faith. And then all of a sudden it was just gone. And something else that I think played a part in me walking away from the church that I was part of is I had moved to Seattle when I was single and I started working on Capitol Hill. Actually, that's where I went to hair school. And I got involved with people of different backgrounds, different faiths, Muslims. I got involved with people that were gay that I had never had gay friends before. I got involved with people that were spiritual in other ways. And it just started opening my eyes to a world that was bigger than the bubble I had been raised in, the Christian bubble, and the church that I was involved in that was very much a bubble. Um, and it kind of made me question a lot about how I had been raised and how I thought about church. And I think that's why I walked away. And I may get into that more longer, but now I want to dive back into my faith once again and find out what I truly believe going forward. I'm single. I have no kids at home. I have no responsibilities other than to myself. And I thought this is the best time to do this. It's time. It's time for me to search out God once again. I've just been feeling this pull lately, not back to religion. I really have issue with organized religion, but I feel like God is pulling me back just through little things. My YouTube feed has been filled with things that are about God. Wes Huff, I've mentioned him before, is a teacher that really delves into historical Bible teachings and other documents that have been found and things that kind of make the Bible seem a little more real and Jesus seem more real. But I've also been kind of pondering the question, and I don't think I'm alone in this, that God could be bigger than just any one religion. Maybe there's just one God, and all these religions are just looking for him in different ways. If you really think about it, religion is very geographical and cultural based. Um, the United States, for instance, is very much Christian. But in the Middle East, Islam is big. In other countries, there's other religions. Definitely Christianity and Islam are the two big ones, but there's lots of religions. And I wonder what kind of similarities they may have. And it started me kind of researching a little bit. When I started digging into this a little bit, and I've used the internet a lot because although I've read the Bible through and through several times, I've forgotten much of it. You don't use it, you lose it. And I didn't want to have to just dig and dig and dig and try to find things. So I put my questions to the internet, which helped me pull up verses that I probably would have took forever finding. Um, and what I found is the God of the Bible was for all nations. I know a lot is talking about how it was for the people of Israel and the Jewish people and things like that. But from the beginning, he speaks of, you know, he created all men and women in his image. And that kind of struck with me. Acts 17, 26 through 27 says, and this is in the NIV version. I know versions vary a little bit, but you got to kind of pick one and go with it. From one man he made all the nations, that they should inhabit the whole earth. And he marked out their appointed times in history and the boundaries of their lands. God did this so that they would seek him and perhaps reach out for him and find him. And that verse kind of stopped me in my tracks because it said God intentionally placed people in different cultures and locations so that they would seek him. And that kind of backs up what I was just saying. One God, but being found in different ways from different cultures and different regions. Romans 1:20 says, "For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made. That suggests creation itself reveals God, meaning anyone, anywhere can notice him. And I believe all religions kind of teach that God is in all things. God is in nature. God is in our souls. God is in the air we breathe. And again, that just reinforces that line of thinking that I'm kind of going down. Isaiah, now those were both from the New Testament, but even back in the Old Testament, before Christ, Isaiah 55, 8 through 9 says, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts your thoughts." Which basically says God is beyond human comprehension. So, how can one group or one religion say that they are the one and only true religion or way to God? I know people are going to throw Jesus at me, but I'm talking about, just God in general at this point. If God is beyond human understanding, would it make sense that different cultures and different geographic areas would describe him or seek him differently? I think so. So then I wanted to think what other religions may say about God. And I do not have access to any of their texts other than through the internet. So if you are from one of these other religions, please forgive me if any of what I speak is wrong, because I'm taking these verses from internet sources and I don't have the actual text. So they may be paraphrased or different than they would actually be in your text. So please forgive me. I'm just trying to understand all this. And forgive me if I say the word wrong. In the Hindu tradition in ancient India, they have the text called the Bhagavad, Bhagavad Gita. I hope I'm saying that right. Right. But in their chapter 4, verse 11, it says, "As men approach me, so do I accept them. All paths are going to lead to me." That was written thousands of years ago in South Asia, yet it echoes the idea that people reach God in different ways. Um, Again, one God, different ways of finding him. The Quran, from 7th century Arabia in the Islam culture, Surah 1636 says, "We certainly sent into every nation a messenger, saying, worship Allah and avoid false gods." That means, according to Islam, God didn't just reveal himself to one culture, but to all nations. Now, I realize their prophet was Muhammad, but again, they're talking about sharing God and sharing Allah with all nations, not just their own. Um, and they call God Allah. We call God God. The Jewish have other names for him. I've heard Yahweh and please forgive me. I can't remember all these. This is a discovery. This is my own personal journey. But it's just kind of making sense to me somehow. The Torah, which from my understanding, and I could be wrong, is the original first few books of the Old Testament. In Genesis 1:27, so God created mankind in his own image, male and female, he created him. Not one tribe, not one region, all humanity. And I believe all humanity came from the original two. I know I'll have arguments of evolution and things like that, but we've still got the missing link, people. It still goes back to the first creation in my mind. I'm not saying I don't believe there's a higher power. I'm just trying to find how it relates to me. But all these texts come from different continents, different centuries, different cultures, but the similar theme is one God, one ultimate source, one divine reality, one creator, one truth beyond human understanding. So again, one God described and found in different ways based on where you live and your culture. All religions are different, they're not the same, but it does raise a question worth asking. Humanity has been reaching toward the same God, just from different directions. That's kind of what I think. That's what I want to believe. I don't want to believe that because someone doesn't follow the way I look for God and that I seek him, they're not they're not living truth. They may be living truth from their culture, their teachings, but it's still the same God and he loves them and he accepts them in the way they come to him. I hope that makes sense. Currently, the largest religion in the world is Christianity. And a lot of that has to do with, you know, just their way of evangelizing and moving out into the world from the very beginning. From the very beginning, when Christ died on the cross, they just went out and just started preaching the gospel. Right behind it, pretty close, is Islam, and it's a very old religion. Now, the other religions fall in behind that in order of their amounts. I'm not going to go all over that, but Christianity and Islam are definitely the two biggest. And Islam does talk about Jesus in the Quran quite a bit. Um, and according to what I've learned, and forgive me if I'm wrong, but I remember seeing a video from Wes Huff saying that they do, their Quran does follow, does talk about Jesus quite a bit, but Muhammad came, oh God, I don't want to get blown up on this, but I think he said he came after Jesus, and the stories he tells of Jesus in the Quran are stories he picked up along his travels. And so some are true, some are not, because it was word of mouth and things like that. And he wasn't there actually when it happened, and maybe didn't always get, because fables and stories and tales do get told about anyone great in history, and some of the things he has were not necessarily true to what our gospels teach, so they might have a misunderstanding of who he was exactly and what he did. But um Christianity, and then that brought me to, let's get beyond that, that taught me to all the denominations of not only Christianity, but even other religions have kind of different sects and different teachings within their own religion, which brings us back to humans and human error and humans trying to figure things out. Um, it's not unique to Christianity. Almost every major religion has different branches. And it's because humans interpret God differently. And then they argue about who's right or wrong. And I'm sure God sits up on his throne and just shakes his head and looks at us like, like any parent would children, and just like, they'll figure it out, kind of a thing. But a lot of times these different denominations came because of geography, language barriers, politics, the interpretation of sacred texts, because over the years, interpretations change based on what's normal for that culture then. I mean, if you read the Bible, it talks about a lot of things that had to do with that current culture that no longer apply to us. Men, women, families, things like that. It's just different now. That doesn't mean that what we do now is wrong. It's just the culture changes over years. And so then the denominations kind of pick up different thought process, and leaders within the church, have disagreements and split off and start their own denominations, and new generations come in with new thoughts, and it doesn't make any of them wrong. They're just, like I said, just like different religions seek out God in different ways, the generations also do so, which changes the way they look at their religion and the way they do things. I'm not making this video or any of these future videos in the next series because I think I have all the answers. I'm making them because I have questions. And like many people, I have to talk things through and listen to myself out loud because I will watch this video back and that gives me insight. And I'm hoping that this will start a conversation where we don't attack each other, but we open our hearts to what could be the truth. I'm not here to argue, I'm here to explore. Um, if you ever wondered about any of this stuff, you're not alone. And that's the other thing I want to make clear. I come from, like I said, a Christian family, and I have aunts and uncles who were so buried, and some still are, in their religion and their church that they truly, it's hard for them to love people where they're at, which is what Jesus calls us to do. Um, it says in the Bible that he loves the people but not the sin, and that's fine. But I think a lot of times Christians and all religions get so wrapped up in their rituals and their religion and the rules and the dogma that they can't just love people where they're at and try to be empathetic and understand people from their point of view. And that's what happened to me when I was so buried into my church bubble. I could not relate with other people in the world. And breaking free of that bubble and moving to an area that had diverse cultural and diverse ways of thinking opened my eyes to a lot. And I met people that were beautiful and loving, but maybe weren't Christians. And I wanted to see God in them. And because my church upbringing and my Christian faith was so embedded in me, I couldn't. And it made me angry. And I got tired of living in that dogma guilt that held me down. Christ is supposed to set us free. And I felt that the church was burdening me with guilt and judgment and things that I don't believe God wants for us. And I think that's why I left the church. And now I want to find God for who he truly is and focus on him and not so much the religious or the teachings that direct the way I seek him. Does that make sense? I hope it does. I'll dive more into this in my next video. I don't want this to get too long, but I hope this has maybe sparked some interest, and we can talk about more of this as we go forward. The end of this video, I was going to say, in my next video, I'll talk about why I walked away from Christ in the first place. But I think talking through this in this video just now, I've kind of answered that question for myself. So now I'll have this next week to ponder and think about where I go from here on this. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.